Hello, a friendly hello again to everybody who is watching this video. This time, Basic of Business will talk a bit about an overview about taxation, so some simple facts for those who do not intend to study taxation or who will study taxation later and just want to have a first overview. So, some literature is available naturally in English language, and one of the recommendable short and affordable books on German tax law in English might be Jochum and Thiele, Introduction to German Tax Law. Then, when it comes to English law, there is a small series by Michael Lamberth, Real Basic Introduction to Income Tax Law, the same about capital gains tax, or about value-added tax. Yeah, and that's not the only thing which you can find everywhere if you look a bit through the internet and look for available books. For example, here there was an ebook published on income tax system in India, and you will probably find similar information on many other countries if you look a bit. From very short introduction to some things by Oxford University Press, there might be available Stephen Smith Taxation. That's rather general, so more on economics and the theory behind taxation. And if you are interested in a big one, that would be the theory, principles of management of taxation. And there are many, many others, usually not cheap because, it's a complicated matter and the people's working time is usually not cheap, and the publishing houses also double or so the price. So only very few things are really affordable. Good. Now let's start to think about taxation. Taxation are first important for an enterprise because when you earn money, you must know what will be left over for you to spend or to invest. So if you don't know that, how much the state leaves you over, then you don't know what you can do with your money, if you can spend it or not. So one of the basic principles when it comes to taxation is everybody should know before which tax duties one has to expect. So that is a reason why you should know about taxation, or at least know when you have to ask somebody for advice. And the second is naturally, we all know that taxation can sometimes be reduced by clever behavior. So we should have a basic understanding of how it works, that you are able to pay less than perhaps others, but in a legal way without getting arrested for it. So, to have some basis, let's first talk about the different payments and what characterizes them, which you can make to the state or have to make to the state on a compulsory basis. One distinguishes fees, contributions, and, last not but least, taxes. The distinction is, if you pay a fee, then you pay, not really voluntarily, but you pay something to the state for a service or a performance of state institutions, or at least for a concrete thing in return. So a fee is paid for a concrete service or action by the state, and that usually should only cover the costs of that state product or service. A contribution is something different from a fee. If you have to pay contributions, you don't necessarily get a service or an asset, an item from the state, but you are the member of a group who is entitled to claim services from a state institution. So, for example, a contribution is what you pay to the social security system, which is state-run in Germany. It entitles you, for example, to claim the services of a doctor. On the other hand, nobody forces you to get sick and go to a doctor. You just have the opportunity to use it. So that's a contribution. Once you have paid, you are entitled to use the services of that system. Usually the contributions are set in a way that the state institution does not make a profit. It just covers the necessary amounts which it needs to be run. So it only covers the cost but doesn't aim at profit. Now, number 3 is taxes. There you have to pay to the state on a compulsory way without getting anything concrete in return. Naturally, if you are living in Germany, let's say, you will profit directly or indirectly from the fact that the state exists here. You walk over streets which are paid from tax money. You do this, you do that. If you get robbed, you will be protected by the police, at least we hope so. And if something has been done wrong, police tries to find the people and arrest them, and so on. All that is what you pay for with your taxes. But the decisive point is the services of the state do not depend on your having paid taxes. That's just no direct connection. So you have to pay, but on the other hand, no claims are connected to that directly, and no claims for state activities are lost when you don't pay taxes. So that's what is the core of taxes. So it's an amount which has to be paid to the state or another state institution, determined under public law, so not by private contract, and you don't get anything specific in return. Taxes are levied from everyone who fulfills the conditions which are established by the law which regulates that tax. So at least that is the German definition of the term tax. It's contained in similar form in the German General Tax Code, the Abgabenordnung. And here you see that from the German perspective, the idea of fairness is even a constituting element of the definition of a tax. Strange, but from our perspective, true. Taxes must be levied from everyone who fulfills the conditions for claiming the tax, so everyone should be treated equally. Naturally, that can only be an aim. There will always some fraudulent people whom you can't catch, but at least the desire or the serious attempt to treat everybody equally and fairly should be built in a tax system. Now we have a first important consequences from that definition. Taxes can only be claimed on the grounds of a law, which then defines if you do this and this, or if you have that and that, or if you fulfill a certain rule, then the consequence is a tax claim which you have to fulfill of a certain amount. So always if-then clauses which define what you have to pay. Now, there is even a very simple background behind that. If you look to what a tax really means in plain words, it means that somebody comes, the state, and takes away your property by force. You can't refuse it. And you don't get anything in return. So that's basically the same thing as a robbery. And there was even somebody in the Middle Ages, a famous doctor, Thomas Aquinas, who brought that into plain words. He said, taxes is the legal form, the legal variant of robbery. And indeed, seems to be very similar. The only difference is taxation is allowed. And indeed, why can it be allowed? Well, stealing, robbing is forbidden by law. And now a very simple principle comes into play. What is forbidden by law can only be allowed by a law, by another law. So if the law makes an exception. So everybody who takes away your property without giving you anything and forcing you to give out that property will be prosecuted as a criminal, apart from the guy who works for the fiscal office, because there is a legal basis which allows that person to take away your money. And that is indeed some development which took place nearly everywhere. Nearly everywhere, taxation can only happen if a law defines that the state may take away money from you. By the way, that's that's not a very old development. You know perhaps that in the Middle Ages, or even in the 16th or 17th or 18th century, when some kings who in theory were ruling as absolute rulers, so who were completely free from legal restrictions, when they had the intention to tax you, they had no choice than to assemble representatives of the population and ask them for their consent to tax them. So when it came to taking away property without the consent of the people, that is a relatively new invention. One didn't think that possible because one regarded it as a kind of criminal activity, as too close to robbing and stealing. Only later, by a tradition that this consent of the people's representatives was always given, and was given sometimes without a time limit, something like a tax became customary. Now, well, so having established that taxes are only legal if they are allowed by law, then we have to look what that means. But first, let's go back to that requirement that we at least have built in the term tax. Everybody who fulfills the conditions of a tax law should be forced to pay. Well, if you really intend to treat people fairly, that's vital, because first, if you define an if-then clause which says if somebody has 100,000, that somebody has to give 30,000 to the states, then that sounds plain and simple, so you have the legal basis. But now if the state then takes away the 30,000 from citizen A, from citizen B, but not from C and D, without any reason for the difference, just because C and D are more liked by the fiscal officers, then taxation is no longer fair, and it's no longer governed by law. It will then be governed by chance, by the coincidence who is working on your case and other things. So that is why tax theory just says, and also the legal practice, everybody who is covered by the words in the law will be forced to pay. There will be no exceptions. If naturally law could also say in certain cases we make an exception, but and again then you would have a general clause. All people who blah blah will be exempt from this tax because we think their being nice is necessary. All the others, where you think, okay, they fulfill the rules, they have enough, you can pay, you strictly define the conditions, and who fulfills them will have to pay. And nobody can hope for mercy, because then it would again end up in that your tax burden depends on how good you can influence your tax inspector or your local fiscal officer, or who works on your case and who shows pity and who is more hard on you. So the principle is everybody will have to pay. So that is also, let's go back to that again, you cannot underestimate that. So if you know the exact words of the tax law and you fulfill that if condition, then the tax will be taken from you. the idea they don't really mean me or they can't mean me is nothing whatever will convince a tax officer, a fiscal officer. They are going to take the tax. The only way who you could escape that application of that tax rule would be that there is another tax rule in a tax law which says, okay, under this, and this conditions, the people do not need to pay, because there we also think it makes no sense. So usually the decisive thing is if you have fulfilled the conditions which are laid down in the tax law for a tax claim, if you have no chance. Now, that means even if you fulfill the tax conditions unintentionally, does not matter. For example, if you have an income of 100,000, then you have to pay 30,000 income tax. If that is a case, nobody thinks about if you wanted that, if you didn't want that, if you achieved that income just by chance, or if you worked heavily for that income. No, the law just says, in my example, whoever has an income of 100,000 has to pay 30,000. So no debates are possible. That means you need to be aware of what the if conditions are for the tax, and you must know about the conditions which trigger a tax. At least you should expect that under certain conditions tax will be taken. Now, on the other hand, there can also be drawn the other conclusion, the other way around. Who does not fulfill the conditions of the tax law will not be covered by the tax condition and so not be forced to pay, because if you don't fulfill the if clause, the then consequence doesn't take place. So even if you think, or if others think, you should be covered by the clause, if they would write the laws in a different way, they would regard it as decent or adequate that you should also pay. If you are not covered by the wording of the law and the sense of the law, they will not make you pay. The idea is, if it is the law which decides, and the law has been made in a long process, long discussions of experts and political representatives of the highest institutions in the country, then some nice little guy working in the fiscal office or some neighbor or so cannot go and say, I am wiser, or I think myself wiser than all the people who had to decide, and I replace their decision by my opinion. No, what they decided in the law is binding until the law is changed. So if you do not fulfill an if clause in the law, no problem. For example, a very nice example is in Germany, whoever is the owner of a dog has to pay a dog tax annually to the city where he or she lives in. Now, you can easily avoid that dog tax by just not keeping a dog, but keeping a cat or a cow, because you don't have a cat, you don't have a dog. You could even take a cat, train it to think that the poor cat thinks it's a dog, that it barks and behaves completely like a dog. Nevertheless, it would be a cat. So, condition not fulfilled. You don't have a dog, no dog tax. Now, one could say, if that is really adequate, for example, nobody can give a really convincing reason why people who hold horses, cows, or cats are not taxed. That's also a kind of a luxury pet. The cow a bit less. Okay, but horses, cats, whales, whatever you have, probably also that is an indicator for that you have a bit too much money, and so that you could pay. But the law just speaks of owners of dogs, and so all the people having other animals are out until Parliament rethinks the matter and says, okay, we are going to include into next year's tax law dogs, cats, cows, and horses, or all animals held for private purposes and not for business. Might be an idea, but has not yet happened, so the tax law will be applied as it stands. You didn't fulfill the condition, you don't have to pay. So that's the road to avoiding taxes, just looking at the conditions and don't fulfill them. So if you are not keen on the tax on champagne, drink beer. But naturally, just to warn you, in Germany there is also a tax on beer. So here you just exchange the one tax against another tax. You can also drink water. Well, it's only half of the fun, but naturally you are not taxed directly or indirectly if you drink water. So, principle seems to be clear. Just do not what the tax names, then the tax doesn't happen. There is one limit. If you avoid the behavior named in the tax law by doing strange things which are in the final effect exactly the same what is named in the law. For example, if there is a value-added tax law which, in a simplified way, says if you sell a book for 10 euro, you have to pay a value-added tax of 7%, that would be 70 cents on the price to the state. Now, the if condition is if you sell a book. Now, I could try to avoid this by doing the following. I make a gift to my customers. They don't need to pay. They get the book for free, but under a condition that they show gratitude to me and make me a gift, a present of 10 euro in return, just for politeness. Now, formally, this would not be a contract, a purchase or sales contract, because I do not sell. I just make a gift under a condition. Now, economically, that's exactly the same. It's just a strange way to apply civil law with the same effect as the transaction named in the law. So you just exchanged formalities, but basically what you did was exactly what was named in the law. You just designed it in a different way. Now you see, buying a cat instead of a dog is doing something different than what has been selected as reason for a tax by the law. It's different, but giving away a book as a gift in return, or under the condition that you get something in return, that's basically exactly the same as defining the word sale. Just by avoiding the word and just by constructing this transaction in a different legal way. But if you look to what happens, there is no really material difference in what happens to what the law describes, and even the motivation is the same. You want to earn money, so no difference which matters can be seen, and that would then still be regarded as doing what the law names. So playing around with such formalities would not be functioning tax planning. It would not help you, because you fulfill, if one properly analyzes what you do, you fulfill the if condition in the law, so the then consequence applies. Such behavior would be called in many states tax avoidance, but that's a wider term. In Germany and in other states, one would prefer to call it a tax abuse or an abusive behavior. And the consequence is just harmless. If you tell the fiscal officer that you don't sell books, but that you give them away for free under the condition that you get 10 euro in return, that will just be treated by him as a normal sale. You would say the word was different, but what you did was a sale. Thank you for informing me properly. So that's it. So tax abuse is nice attempt, but doesn't work. That's simply the truth. So that's one of the reasons why you often need a tax advisor. They know where the differences are. So which of your most clever ideas are laughable and will be regarded by the fiscal office as just a tax abuse, so as doing the things which are described in the law, and which behavior is sufficiently different from what is named in the law. They have experience and follow jurisdiction, so they can give you advice. This idea which you have will never go through. They will just treat it as tax abuse and so tax you as it would have been done otherwise. So here again you have that example. Turnover tax, so value-added tax, is levied on sales. Just avoiding a sales contract by doing exactly the same in a different form does not really help. That is, by the way, a common understanding which nearly all countries in the world have, because otherwise our tax laws would be getting more and more complicated, or they would break down completely. If you accepted that making a gift under the condition that I get a determined amount of money in return, that this is something different than selling, then naturally nobody would sell anymore. You would have shops where the shop owners are always generous and make you gifts. Oh, nice that you are here. I like you very much. I make a present to you. Which present do you want to have? Okay, this bottle of beer. Okay, I make you this as a present under the condition that you make me a present in return of €2. That would be so simple, and we would have a fascinating life. Children would always ask, why does everybody make presents to others? And the answer would be, well, child, that's just because of tax. Then child would say, oh, daddy and mommy, then tax must be a very, very fantastic invention because it makes people so generous. The grown-ups would say it's just a sham transaction. So nearly every country covers that by a general anti-abuse rule, which says always when you show abusive behavior, you will be taxed as if you had behaved in a normal way. Naturally, it is not possible to foresee every clever idea by which somebody might replace a sales contract by achieving, nevertheless, exactly the same result. So you can only establish a general rule if somebody chooses strange ways to do something, and in the basic contents or basic outcome, it's exactly what is described by the law. No differences which really matter. Then you fulfilled it and it will be applied. If there are differences, for example, different situation with completely different motivation, so that evidently what you did is not the same from the perspective of an average person, because the aim to circumvene, to avoid the tax law was not present, then the situation would be different. For example, when it comes to Christmas, very often you have people exchanging presents. Very often these presents will also have a similar value, otherwise it's probably awkward between grown-ups. If one makes you a present of €500 and you make a present of €5 to that person, you will feel a bit awkward afterwards, so that doesn't happen. Nevertheless, this is not a transaction to avoid a sales contract. That would be just a customs. Now you might be very clever and say, okay, then I just use that sales avoidance maneuver, gift against gift, on Christmas. So I open my shop on Christmas and then I do exactly this. Now a neutral observer would say, what you are doing there, friend, everybody who knows about life knows what you're doing there is just selling. To customers, you give presents under the condition that they make you a present of comparable value. No, within your family we would believe this is a Christmas present against the Christmas present between friends, we would believe it, but not if it takes place in your shop with everybody in the shop. So that would be a bit naive. That would even be tax abuse on Christmas. So you see, things can be debated. If something is regarded as abusive by the tax authorities and not abusive by you, neutral person will be asked for decision. That would be a judge, and then you bring forward your arguments why it is not the same as in the law. They would say it is the same, and the judge will decide. And yeah, very often if you had a naive idea, the judge will say, yeah, good. So that is why you probably need advice, because in order to be able to avoid an unnecessary tax, you first must know and understand the conditions in the law very well, and you must know which behavior is sufficiently different from it. By the way, it is in the long run not even immoral to avoid a tax, because if the fiscal office finds out, or if Parliament finds out that a tax can be easily avoided by doing something similar but different, then the tax will have to be adapted to that. You will have to include the alternative behavior too, or you will have to rethink the whole concept of the tax. So if you find something where the tax treats comparable things not equally, so not basically fair, then the tax law will have to react, or otherwise everybody will in 1 or 2 years do the thing which does not fulfill the tax law, so the tax becomes senseless and void, because nobody in the future will ever again pay that tax apart from a few idiots. And that is something which will not be tolerated, so tax law will then adapt to that you found out, and in the long run, by this, tax law gets more and more systematic and fair and comprehensive. Now tax saving attempts can become a crime, you know that. Now surprisingly, tax abuse as such is not yet a crime. Why? If you honestly fill in your tax declaration and tell them what you did and say, no, I don't sell things, I just give them away under the condition that my customers make me a present and I tell them how much. Then they can know all the facts, can apply the rules, can say, well, that is nothing else than you sell things for money, only the words are different. We accordingly apply the value-added tax law to your situation. You sold a book for €10, please give us 70 cents. Now a crime would be tax fraud or tax evasion. Tax evasion is more and more the more frequent word. In Germany it would more be tax fraud. The German word would be Steuerhinterziehung. That's happening, or that requires 3 conditions. First, you don't tell the fiscal office the truth. You know, the fiscal office applies the tax laws to the situation in the outside world. So they ask you what you did, and then they check if you fulfilled the if clauses of tax law, and then apply the then clauses. You did this, so you have to pay. Now, if you don't give them the full information, or if you lie to them, or if you hide information on which they have a right to get it, then they are no longer able to apply the tax laws correctly, and that is the red line. So lying or hiding the truth is dangerous. That is what is tax fraud. If you just tell them honestly what you did, declare everything you did, then they can apply the laws. Nothing happens, apart from, okay, they will probably find you strange if you did the thing, I just give away my books in return for presents, but that will not endanger the correct and fair application of the tax law to everybody in the outside world. So equal treatment of all taxpayers is still guaranteed. no problem. From their perspective, no criminal offense. Now, naturally, if you lie to the fiscal office, you only commit a tax crime when that leads to a tax advantage to you. If, for example, you lie about your income, you say, I had an income of 500,000, they charge you with income tax of 250,000, and in reality your income was only 400,000, and your tax would have been lower. Well, then you lied to them about information on which they have a claim. But, well, then it led to a higher tax, and that's nothing what they are going to complain about. Then they just regard you as an idiot, but not as a criminal. So your lie or the information which you hide must be causing a tax advantage. To make that clear, if you lie and somebody else thereby saves taxes, that is also a crime, because the law does not require that it's your tax advantage which you achieve by a lie. It can also be tax fraud, so criminal offense with prison and other consequences, if you lie in order to make it possible that somebody else pays less taxes, pays them too late, or whatever. Any advantage in the tax area for any person which is caused by your lie or by your hiding information is tax fraud. And naturally, additional condition necessary for all criminal offenses is you must act intentionally. Now, that is usually where naive people always say, I will get out of it. They never can prove that I acted intentionally. Now, what you should know is, in criminal things, there is a rule: in cases of reasonable doubt, the criminal or the accused has to be acquitted. But the problem is, it must be the judge who has a doubt. And if the judge is convinced that you did it on purpose, and nobody helps you. The only person who could help you is God himself in that situation, and he usually is not going to help tax fraud people. So experience says this. So if it looks as if you acted on purpose from the perspective of a judge, and that judge sees from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the evening only accused people accused of crimes, and they all bring forward, no, I'm not guilty, I didn't act on purpose, I had no idea of what I'm doing. So how plausible is that this judge at 4 in the afternoon is going to believe you, really you, for the first person standing in front of him or her? You will be the non-guilty person. Yes, go on dreaming. So you can't probably talk yourself out of a tax crime by pretending you didn't do it on purpose. By the way, purpose, intentional behavior is already fulfilled if you saw the risk that what you were doing was wrong and didn't care about it. So if you accepted that it might be causing a forbidden outcome, then your behavior is, under a criminal law perspective, already fully intentional, and you can be punished for it, and you will. And so if you studied and can read and write and have a basic understanding of business, never hope that you can talk yourself about out of a tax reproach, out of criminal prosecution by pretending that you did not act on purpose. The only way to be on the safe side is that you avoid any hiding of information and any falsification of information, that you tell the fiscal office everything. And that's the charming effect of legal tax saving models. You can take a loudspeaker, place yourself in front of the local fiscal office and shout to their windows, I avoided dog tax, I bought 2 cats, and I call them Bello and Nero, and they believe there are dogs, and I feed them with Frolic, and I don't pay dog tax, and then they can't do anything about it because what you did was legal. So the test is, could I tell them everything which I did freely and openly so that they still would be helpless? Then your tax saving model is absolutely legal. Then you can do it. If you feel that instinct already, that will work if they don't find out, then this is already a case of trying to commit tax fraud, because then you expect it might not be legal and you try to hide this and to deceive them. So from the German perspective, if you honestly declare what you did and then go bankrupt so that you can no longer pay your tax, that's just bad luck. You disclosed everything. You honestly declared your income, and now you lost everything you have before you could pay. Well, no tax fraud, just bad luck. And by the way, if you think that a tax administration which has a claim against you lets you go away without having paid, then you will get some surprises in the future. They will teach you how to pay. Don't worry, they will find ways to make you pay, but it will not be a crime. Now, on the other hand, if somebody has a tax avoidance tip for you and then says you can do it, they will never find out this. Hands off, this is the nearly 100% proof that the suggestion which comes now is illegal. So never do it, never take part in it, because if you take part in the criminal activity of somebody else, you can also be punished as an accessory to the crime. So hands off and run away. And if you work in the economy, in a business, never get involved in things where you lie to the fiscal office or hide information from the fiscal office. Even if somebody says we shouldn't tell this, the tax advisor, that's a clear indication that something fishy is going on. Don't get involved in that, and hands away. Good. It might be in rare cases that you don't declare something to the fiscal office, but that you really don't know that this event has tax consequences. That might be that the judge in the end believes you did not know that this is hiding information from the fiscal office, but this, so intention is missing. This happens very, very rarely. And from the moment on when they can show you that you were well educated, you should have known it, you're lost. Or from the moment onwards when they can prove that you did activities to cover up actively what was happening, that's a clear indication that you knew. If they knew or found out the truth, then this had tax consequences. So if you actively try to hide facts or information, that's a clear indicator that you absolutely knew what's going on, and so that's intentional behavior. Good. Let's go on a bit. Which kind of taxes do you have? Many, and more than many. So fiscal ministers are highly ingenious, inventive persons. They invent taxes after taxes. So you can only classify that enormous amount of taxes. And a very good system to classify them is concerning what is tax. There are taxes on income, so when you get the money. Taxes on wealth, so during the period when you have the money. And taxes on consumed, so when you spend it. So every point of time in the course of time is covered. Income tax, corporation tax, or a special local tax in Germany on business owners, trade tax. All that is taxes on income. Inheritance tax, or an annual property tax, or even the real estate tax, which is levied by a city on the value of a house annually with, let's say, 0.1%, or I don't know what. That is also a wealth tax. taxes on consume. The most important is value-added tax, but also taxes on special goods like tobacco tax, coffee tax, or what else you can imagine, beer tax, champagne tax, or so. All that would be taxes on consume. Now there is also a frequent distinction which distinguish according to the way in which somebody is taxed, that is direct taxes and indirect ones. The direct taxes is the person whom you want hit by the tax is asked to pay the tax in person. The indirect taxes would be the ones where the person who is obliged to declare and pay the tax to the fiscal officers, the taxpayer, is not meant to be the person who shall end up with the tax burden, but it's even planned in the design of the tax that this taxpayer just shifts on the tax burden to his customers, for example, by claiming higher prices. That often happens with consume taxes. Tobacco tax is collected from the sellers of tobacco or the producers, but then the producers just charge their customers a higher price. So in the end, the customers indirectly pay the tobacco tax, and that is even built in the plans of the legislator for this tax. So it's called an indirect tax, because the people whom you really want to tax by the tax are indirectly tax the consumers. Well, at the end, some important things which you should know when you deal with taxation. All the rest can probably be left to an advisor. One of the things is there are deadlines, just as in your studies, there are deadlines. For example, a tax notice can be objected against if you are not happy with that and think the law has been wrongly applied to the facts by the fiscal office, or they didn't know all the facts and you want to bring their attention to the facts which they overlooked. So you might object against the tax notice and say, this was wrong, please review it. Now, they want to be sure and they want to know which money they can spend. So they want to have certainty about which taxes they can claim within a short period of time. So usually you only have 1 month after getting the tax notice for an objection. Now, if it's 1 month and 1 day, it's too late. So even if you got a wrong tax notice claiming 1 million from you, instead of only 100,000, then usually after 1 month, case is closed, decision stands and will be upheld. There are some exceptions which a tax advisor knows, where you can reopen the deadline again, or still still achieve certain changes. That's rather rare. The basic rule is, if you don't inform the fiscal office within the objection period that you do not agree, and in how far you do not agree with the tax notice which you received, then everything's too late. Then decision stands even if it is wrong. So it's absolutely vital that you react to a tax notice, or, by the way, also other authorities in Germany do it the same way, that you reject within short notice, within short time. Don't wait for 3 weeks and 6 days before you pass on your tax notice which you received to your tax advisor. Then probably any reaction is too late. Tax advisor also needs time, and they didn't wait for you. They also have a full-time schedule, so probably that would be too late. The proper reaction would be, I get a tax notice or other information or other letters from the fiscal office where there is a legally binding decision announced. Then I immediately react and pass it on to my tax advisor if I have one, and then tax advisor reacts within the deadline and everything's fine. Good. Okay, let it be enough for today. I thank you very much for listening, and hope to see you soon again on this channel. Hope you enjoyed it. One can never be sure with taxation, at least. If you didn't enjoy it, now rejoice. It's over for today. And there are still some chapters which are going to come. So wait for new chapters to be published on this channel. Thank you very much and see you again. Oh my god, I fear this channel name was so true again today. So true. Sorry, I was probably tired. Don't know what, yeah, happens.